So, say you're a late blooming, socially awkward young man, and you're tired of getting shoved into lockers by bigger, older boys that are good at sports. And you're thinking of taking revenge on them all. Say you saw one of the two signs posted outside of your school. First one, right here, you know, all weapons are prohibited on these premises. You go, oh shucks, there's no way for me to level the playing field and take vengeance because I can't bring anything to change my odds. Or you see this other sign here. Staff heavily armed and trained. Any attempt to harm children will be met with deadly force. Now, if you were a coward, which sign do you think would intimidate you into choosing a different course of action? So we can file this one under an actual common sense gun law. Finally, Florida teachers can now be good guy with a gun under new bill allowing them to pack heat. So Zero Hedge reports Florida's House of Representatives passed a bill on Wednesday allowing full-time teachers to carry guns in the classroom, expanding on a program launched in the wake of the deadly Parkland school shooting. The bill was passed by a vote of 65 to 47 after 2 days of debate in which Republicans thwarted Democratic legislators' attempts to amend, stall, or kill the measure. It was approved by Florida Senate's last week by a vote of 22 to 17 and heads to the desk of Republican Governor Ron DeSantis. And if you'll remember, DeSantis was officially certified as winner in November 20th, 2018, following a machine recount. So this was a very close election. And you can see the importance of the outcomes of a lot of elections because his opponent most certainly would not have signed this bill. Teachers are going to be required to complete a 144-hour training course as part of the Voluntary Guardian Program. So, Donald Trump and the NRA have argued an armed teacher could provide the best defense against a school shooter. And this is pretty obvious because you have someone on scene. When seconds matter, the police are minutes away, that whole thing. Now, the opponents, this is always an interesting counter-argument they present. They question whether the solution to gun violence should be the presence of more guns, and warned of the danger of a teacher misfiring during a crisis or police mistaking an armed teacher for the assailant. Now, I assume how to behave around the police is going to be part of the 144-hour training course, but look at how they frame these concerns, as if the simple presence of a tool makes accidents even more likely. Even more guns. Well, think about that with any other machine. Even more cars. Well, if you have people driving that are trained, that are following the rules, that are sober, that are smart, you can have all kinds of cars on the road. And highway driving is one of the safest forms of driving you can do. So it's just kind of weird when you see non-gun owners trying to imagine why it is guns are unsafe. They come up with some very strange things, and a lot of it is just lack of familiarity with the machine. They warned of the danger of a teacher misfiring. Now, after 144 hours, this should not be a concern. A misfire? Consider, in order to misfire, what has to happen? There have to be a whole bunch of fail-safes that go wrong. It's kind of like if someone had never driven a car before and you're explaining, here's the car, you park it here in this spot, and they ask a question, well, what if the car starts itself and goes into reverse? It's like, well, that doesn't happen. It's a machine. And they've done studies. They've found one of the best ways to help people with their fears about firearms is to actually take them out, let them handle the machine, let them fire it, let them see how it operates. And then a lot of this boogeyman nonsense about these, just having a gun is what causes violence. Having a gun is what causes incidents. They just misfire. They just go off. You set it on your desk and it may just, like a car, it just might start all on its own. And you realize, no, this is like any other machine. This is like any other tool. A nail gun doesn't just go off if it's not hooked up. You use it responsibly, and it serves a purpose. So, guns rights advocates have hailed the bill's passage as a victory. So, backers of the new bill argue that school shootings occur too quickly for law enforcement to respond, while opponents say the measure could lead to accidental shootings or misfirings. I would argue once you have a crisis situation in progress, your primary concern is going to be your ability to defend yourself and stay safe. So some counties are opting out, that's freedom. And we get to see how this works. This is the Reuters article here. It's interesting to kind of see how the fake news media spins this. I just want to point out a couple little pieces of rhetoric that you see used. This is basically the same information as above. Florida teachers can arm themselves. Gives you the same basic details. Passage marks a victory for gun rights advocates. This is the rhetoric you see used. Passage marks a victory for gun rights advocates who were on the defensive a year ago when Parkland students inspired nationwide protests in favor of gun control. So you think of these little children, bringing a nation together, that we were all inspired for a better utopian world, versus after the Parkland shooting, Florida lawmakers rushed through legislation. It's almost like they didn't read it, like they had to pass it to find out what's in it. They rushed through the legislation that requires schools to place just one armed staff member or law enforcement officer at each campus. One per campus was too many, was problematic, was concerning. So just to see, keep in mind when you're reading these articles, everything is written and the language is very carefully chosen to slant your opinion or make you focus on different parts of the story. If you don't have the facts, if you don't have the full picture. So Florida's, this is interesting here because I always wonder who opposes this sort of thing. It does really seem common sense. If there's someone in my school and they're hell-bent on doing something horrible, I would want as many people there that were able to protect me as possible. Well, Florida's gun control advocates, now this is quite the juicy euphemism here, anti-Second Amendment zealots maybe? Florida's gun control advocates had made stopping the proposal a top priority. This was their top priority. Among them, Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense, which is funded by billionaire and former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg. So here you can see Mr. Bloomberg, and you can see him. This is a picture of him meeting Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. So a lot of these gun-grabbing schemes or the opposition to common sense implementation of guns in schools or places to keep people safe, you'll find very often is backed by these billionaires. And that's the primary thrust behind it, because they just have the money to push for all of this, and the rest of us are just getting pushed around. But it's so interesting to me how they discuss how illogical it is to have guns in schools, as if this somehow creates violence simply by the presence of the machine. And yet, they don't seem to have any trouble using armed guards to protect their trucks full of money.